What's the most f***ed up thing you've done for money? I once was bored in my mid-20s, around 3 a.m., and I saw a gig on Craigslist. Turned out an escort needed a safe driver to get her to gigs. Not thinking too much about it, I contacted her and spent the rest of the morning driving her around. At one appointment, she came downstairs, came to my truck, handed me $20 and told me she needed more condoms. I was taken back but decided what the hell. So I went to the local pharmacy, this was now almost 6 a.m., and bought 2 boxes of condoms for her. Went back, handed them off, then proceeded to wait for 2 more hours. She eventually came out. I drove her back home, where she paid me $150. I felt so wrong taking the money. Knowing she was getting railed for her money, then had to pay me. I took the money anyways, and she was pleased I was a pleasant young man, driver. One of the weirdest odd occurrences for me by far. Story 2. Late one night in my 20s in Okinawa, an overweight female bartender at a dodgy karaoke bar asked to see my peenie. It was pierced at the time. I quipped that it would cost her $10. She joked back that for $10, I should be naked. Welp, the other bartenders all threw into the pot, including a really attractive one. And so did some of the customers, mostly dudes, who thought it would be funny to call my bluff. All told, I made around $120 to drink a beer in the nude while being jeered by a bunch of drunk expats. Guess I could put semi-pro stripper on my resume? Story 3. Elementary school. Licked the janitor's mop for $2.35? And no, it's not a euphemism. It did because that's how much 2 slices of pizza cost in the cafetorium. Story 4. Was at family dinner, and my uncle complained that my aunt burnt the green beans. As a joke, he said he would pay anyone $50 to eat the whole bowl. He did not expect me to take him on the offer. This was a dinner bowl meant for like 14 people. So that night, I didn't eat an actual dinner, just an obscene amount of green beans. Surprised I didn't barf, and I had interesting weird craps for the next 2. Story 5. Answered a Craigslist ad to kick a guy in the balls and walk on him for $160. Liked the easy gig and the money, made about $10K doing that afterwards, and went to Europe for 2 months. Story 6. Not me, but a friend of mine accepted 300 pounds for Intim. Despite being into degrading sex, hence accepting this, she really had no need for the money. She was so unaroused by the guy that they couldn't get his banana inside her. Dry like the Sahara. So she wanked him off. No one came out of that experience well. Story 7. When I was 10, a dwarf offered to pay me if I stripped for him in the back of a dirty subway station, and I accepted. World of Warcraft is a strange game. Story 8. I used to give myself paper cuts for money in high school. Earlobe, eyelid, top or bottom, finger webbing, etc. People paid way too much for that. Story 9. When I was back in school, I had a good friend who was getting bullied quite badly. He was scared to stand up to the guy bullying him as he was quite small. He paid me the holy sum of a Mars bar to hit his bully round the back of the head with a fire extinguisher. Cue an unconscious 12-year-old and me getting a rather long suspension from school and interviewed by the police. I was such a git back then. We were all in the same year at school. I was just a bit of a loose cannon back then. As others have said, it wasn't the high-pitched ding sound you'd expect. More a dull thud. No lasting injuries. Brain damage occurred. The guy I hit was a real nasty piece of work. But I agree I took it too far and felt genuinely guilty after. The Mars bar was pretty damn epic. Story 10. My friend offered me €20 to have a staring competition with an escort in Amsterdam. I went right up to the glass and stared at her for around 30 seconds before she opened the door and threw boiling water over me. She lost, and I got the money. Story 11. I spent 5 years in China teaching ESL. In addition to the school I worked for, I took private students as well. One was a successful but bored plastic surgeon. 90% of his business was the same 3 surgeries, so he wanted to learn English to break up the tedium. He would call me at random times with little or no notice and ask if I wanted to come over and give him a lesson. So one night he called me to come to his office. Very normal. But when I got there, the nurse was giving me booties and a hairnet and telling me to scrub my hands. Before I knew it, I was in the operating room giving him an English lesson while he performed a nose job. I crap you not. I barely made it through. The surgery channel makes me lightheaded, and I was catching the live show. Pretty much scarred for life now. He wasn't performing surgery on me. It was someone else's nose job. I was just an observer. It was a violation of like all known procedures of sterility and cleanliness in the OR too. China is basically the Wild West. Story 12. I was a waiter at a restaurant with a prep line that had mayo on it. There was only one dish that used mayo that no one ordered. So this mayo would sit out all day and get this foul yellow skin. I bet a buddy $100 to eat the skin right before the shift started. I spooned off the whole bucket myself and it was a heaping scoop. He powered through it, but not long after he was absolutely green. We are still friends. Story 13. A friend of mine who is now a Marine wanted to punch me in the face as hard as he could, so of course I said no. but then we agreed on the stomach for $30. It stung like a git, but not enough to stop him from doing it again for another 10. Story 14. Barely made rent and hadn't eaten in 3 days was a rough post-breakup year for me. Found an ad on Craigslist for some guy that was willing to pay someone to lock him in a cage and pee on him. $50 later, I had enough cheap noodles and sriracha to not go hungry for a while. Story 15. Met a girl online through a pole fitness thread. I was teaching pole at the time and traveling through her city with a friend, Canadians backpacking through Europe. She said she was interested in a private lesson. Because I was young and dumb, sure, whatever. My friend and I part ways at the train station. I do give her the girl's address, phone number, forum username, and the contact info of a friend who uses the forum. The girl's transgender, had run away from home, and was working as a stripper to make money. I knew all of that. However, the reality of the situation didn't hit me until I was in her apartment. She lived in a building where each floor shared a bathroom, and her apartment was a studio with a kitchenette. She had a twin bed, 2 chairs, a small table, and a pole. She had written words of affirmation like, "You're a star, you're amazing, you're worthy," on paper and taped them all around her apartment. Cheap makeup and clothing was everywhere. Anyways, I taught a lesson as promised. Just very basic moves since she needed a lot of work. I gave her things to work on. She cried and said she felt beautiful and like a girl. She told me about where she worked and how excited she was to hopefully make more money with her new moves. She pays me money and I leave. It's ducked up because it was extremely stupid of me. I literally walked into a stranger's apartment building in a foreign country without even knowing what she looked like. I just assumed she was a real person because we had interacted in the thread loosely for months before I announced my trip. I didn't even have my BlackBerry on me since roaming charges were the worst. The entire thing also ducked me up because seeing the state of her apartment and having her cry about feeling beautiful just messed with my head. I've lived a relatively sheltered and privileged life, and this was a reality that I was not prepared for. Story 16. I sold an item from EverQuest. Bone-clasped girdle. IRA from Dragonite in Plane of Fear. I really wanted to keep the item, but I also really wanted $450 to be able to cover my rent. Story 17. I was paid $3 to eat a lemon-scented wet nap. It was in high school, and I'm not proud. Also, I quickly discovered that lemon-scented did not translate to lemon-flavored. Story 18. Steal adult film mags from the corner store by my house and then sell them to horny guys at my college. This was around 1998 to 1999 before everyone had smartphones and high-speed internet. Story 19. Stole from family, pawned everything I had, helped a dude shake down his knocks who owed him money, and drove him all over town until he threw a handful of substances at me and laughed as I scrambled to pick him up. Yeah, that was like 8 years ago, and life is much better now off the substances. Story 20. Back in the day, I had this friend. He was about 17, 18 at the time. This friend was big into those style sites from the early 2000s where you had to get people to sign up for free trial offers using a CC, and if you got enough friends, you would get a free iPod or Xbox or TV or computer. He was skeptical that it would work, so he tested by finding 5 real adults he knew to give it a try, and what do you know? He actually got his free iPod. But these sites were wise, and you often couldn't sign up for the same free trials repeatedly using the same person, even with different CCS. And only a few offers were genuinely free or risk-free. So this friend needed to find another group of people willing to complete free trial offers. About this same time, Yahoo chat rooms were still a thing, as were Yahoo chat custom rooms. Obviously, that led to some pretty vile stuff, daddies 4 inches and similar, with people looking for girls or boys to cyber with, trade pics with, or even meet. This friend realized that most of these pervs were older, meaning they had CCS, dumb, and horny. It wouldn't take much in the way of promising anything to get them to sign up for free trials. So this friend made a screen name and posed as a girl in these chats. When dozens of men would immediately message my friend, in his best impersonation of a girl, would chat and weed out the ones who didn't seem serious, and focus on the ones who were persistent. He would chat with them for a bit, 5, 10 minutes, and then ask them to do him a favor. That favor, of course, was signing up for a free trial because IRLY need a new iPod. It worked. This friend ended up with a free iPod, free Xbox, free desktop PC, and free PC monitor. He then sold most of them for cash. Side note, one of the guys he talked with was so persistent about meeting his fake persona, he reported that guy, who provided his name/address/phone/pics, to the FBI, who came and took a statement from my friend because the person was a known offender. Story 21. When I was about 17, I got offered £500 to rob my dealer's supply. I did. And then I spent the next 6 months crapting myself that if he ever found out it was me, he'd probably hunt me down and gut me like a fish. but the guy kept it in a massive ducking backpack in his shed. I mean, come on, dude, it was just so easy. To explain the economics of this, it was probably 30, 40 ounces of weed in that bag, so thousands worth. Story 22. I was once paid $1 per second to lay face down in the snow naked. I made $300 before my friends ran out of cash. Same group of fellows offered to pay me $500 to pepper spray me. I told them, make it $600 and don't tell me it's coming. Man, I made $900 of them idiots. Story 23. I used to know a couple who ran an adult nursery. IF was paid £25 an hour to dress up in cute, frilly outfits and spend time with adult men who wanted to be treated like babies. At one point, I spent an hour watching Thunderbirds episodes with a client. That was what all he wanted to do. I personally don't consider it ducked up, but I'm sure some people reading this won't know how to feel about it. Story 24. I'm at this very moment sitting in a hospital bed undergoing clinical trials for a new type of untested antibiotic. The substances itself isn't too bad, apart from some slight nausea and vomiting at times, but damn me if they aren't half starving us. One piece of toast and a small serving of cereal for breakfast at 8:20 a.m., a pasty, a yogurt and a plum for lunch at 4:20 p.m., a small serving of bolognese or some kind of curry with a bread roll and a fruit cup for dinner at 12:20 a.m. I'm not the only one who is reported feeling dizzy or lightheaded, but they seem to attribute it to the side effect of the drug, not that fact that we seem to be on a sub-2,000 calorie diet. Each meal is separated by exactly 8 hours to the minute. Just in case it wasn't obvious, this is 2 days worth of food. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner over 2 days. Story 25. Wrote a sonnet about hating seagulls and wishing for their genocide. This was for an English assignment too, and it counted for about 10% of my grade. Yep, I potentially jeopardized my grade for a stupid joke and $5. I can't send it. My English teacher has it. He hasn't given them back. I got like 80% from the seagull sonnet. I confused everyone in the classroom, but they all actually liked it. Apparently, hatred of seagulls is popular. Story 26. Honestly, it wasn't really that bad. Call me boring, but the most I made was $100 when someone in high school paid me to write their final paper. It wasn't even a hard paper to do. I guess she was just lazy. Anyway, I made her pay me half up front and half after she got a passing grade. Anyway, word got around and I ended up being paid to do small things like finish people's homework or write papers. Someone even paid me $50 to change the answers on his test to get at least a C, but no more than a B. I used to help one of our teachers grade papers and tests. They were actually pretty secretive about it, and I'm glad no adults found out because I would have been in a lot of trouble. Story 27. Was a stripper. Had a regular client pay me to drink, then have me ask him for permission to piss. I have overactive bladder syndrome, so this often resulted in me pissing myself. He always tipped more and paid for a new outfit for me when that happened. Story 28. I did a stint on a FPSO. FPSO equals sign floating, production storage and offloading. Basically a big-ass boat that they use for oil production, except it stores the oil on board. Anyways, the ship was so crowded for commissioning that every morning and evening I got to ride this glorified bird cage into a smaller boat that I called the Vomit Comet, because the motion was nasty and was pretty puke-filled. My favorite part, besides the questionable food, was the prison-like atmosphere. Like once, the weather was really bad, so we sailed to a small international port, which was also a UN refugee holding center, and we walked around to parking lots for like 3 hours and were super happy. Oh, and the bloody rags all over the hallway. Good times. Story 29. Many years ago, I filmed my neighbors having sex to sell copies of the tapes to other. They had a big bay window, and if I sat on my roof, I could see right in. They thought they had privacy on that side of the house since we were the only nearby neighbors, and there was a large cedar hedge between the houses, up on an embankment. But sitting up on the roof, I could see right in. No problem. When I told kids at school about it, one kid stole his parents' video camera and some tapes, and then we split the profits from selling the tapes. Pretty good money for the time. $10 per copy. But yeah, pretty ducked up when I think about it. Story 30. When I was green as duck and only 21 years old, I did structural reinforcing steel, rebar, for almost 6 months. This was my first heavy construction job. It was considerably terrible. Most of my coworkers were ex-cons, addicts, people with mental illness, the occasional homeless person looking for a quick buck, and almost all of them combined had horrible attitudes. They begged me for cigarettes. Some of these guys never brought a lunch. They hassled me all day long for being small, not very strong, young, green, and literally every other thing they could think of. They'd steal my crap or other people's crap. They'd show up drunk, high, hungover, and puking, you name it. I could write a book about all the crazy crap I've seen in construction. A whole entire half of it would be filled with the gits I worked alongside in rebar alone. These guys were all degenerates. I hated them all. And it didn't take too long for me to realize one of them would be the reason I got hurt on the job if I stuck around. Some of them were drunk at work, high, or just plain crapheads when it came to doing dangerous things. And worst of all, they all bullied each other, including me, into doing these sketchy things at work. Whether it was using a chop saw with the handle broken and cracked in a million places, to ramming 35M bars through holes drilled in structural concrete too hard and fast and risking hurting someone, they didn't give a duck. Their attitudes were, "We're tough, degenerate gits and proud of it." The other trades on these jobs avoided these guys or just talked crap about them. They were asterisk holes. Nobody liked them. I duckin' hated that job and quit after 6 months. When I mean quit, I mean I undid my tool belt one day on a rebar mat we were tying, threw it on the ground along with my hard hat and walked off. I didn't look back, nor did I ever talk to any one of those pieces of crap ever again. Heavy construction like that, but especially damn the losers who do it with their addictions, criminal records, and grade 9 educations. I'm glad there's a place in society for degenerate duckin' idiots like that, in the bottom of hole, tying steel in the pissing rain where they belong. If you think I'm being a little too harsh and bitter, I don't care. You don't understand the hell I've been through on certain jobs. Literally 90% of it was doing rebar. That was when I was 21. I'm 35 now and still in trades. Just not ones filled with troglodytes and gits. I've done construction work since I was 15 and still in high school during the summer times. Jobs and projects come and go, but I'll asterisk never asterisk. Forget the 6 months in hell I did tying steel. It felt like I was in jail or on the chain gang. Story 31. Was bartending at a very busy city nightclub catering to the after-work Friday corporates, in a small busy back bar next to the dance floor that has only myself and another staff member. Our section was about as busy as any bar can be. Anyway, this suited smarmy is leaning all over the bar trying to chat up girls, taking up all the space, meaning no one else could get served. Asked him once, twice, 3 times for his order, and each time he stated he turned away to tell some joke or slimy pickup line. Totally head. He takes out his wallet, and as he takes his eyes off me again and looks towards a girl, about $1,000 and $100 notes falls out and plops into my ice well. Time slows down. I speed up. I bury that cash with ice in a nanosecond. He looks back at me knowing something has happened, but can't tell what. I then politely offer to pay for his drink if he would like to complete his order. He orders, takes his drinks and leaves. I wait 10 minutes and recover the cash along with a baggie of Coke that fell into the ice well. By the end of the night, my fellow bartender and I had finished the Coke and spent the cash. Story 32. My girlfriend sold panties to a man for $250 as long as he could see her take them off in front of him. We were hard up for money, so I'd drive her there and keep an eye on her. Then one day we had sex in front of him for $400. He complimented the size of my banana and then never emailed again. I think I destroyed the fantasy for him. Story 33. Was at the pub playing poker. I lost early. Nothing unusual. However, I was standing behind a friend when I noticed a 20 on the floor beside him. I knew it wasn't his. He's poorer than me. He also pays my bills. That's a different issue. I did the whole throw your foot on it to cover it, drag it closer, casually drop wallet so nobody suspects anything. Success. Not my finest moment, but $20 is $20. Story 34. I sold dirt online. Authentic Louisiana voodoo soil, to be exact. The listing on eBay was literally just me talking about how I live in LA. And the dirt would be from my backyard and would possibly contain anything from grass to bugs, etc. Sold 2 pounds of it to 2 diff buyers for about $40 total. Turns out there are dirt collectors in the world and they like to win auctions. Story 35. I was a male escorts for about 18 months. It just kind of happened. My GF broke my heart, so I hit the gym super hard. I am a bartender at a restaurant that is near a massive office park, so there are a bunch of big hotels in the immediate area. After a few months of going to the gym 6 days a week, I started getting propositioned by a lot of female bar customers constantly. Most of them were traveling business professionals staying at the hotels that neighbor my restaurant. I was being slipped the hotel room key almost every night. One night I had a woman kind of shamelessly begging me to come up to her room after my shift, and I half-jokingly / not asked her how much it would be worth to her. When she paid her tab, she left me a $150 tip on a $35.40 tab and told me that she was expecting me when I got off. That's how it started, and I just worked that angle every time I had a woman ask me to go back to her room. The women were between moderately attractive and very attractive, mostly in their mid to late 40s years. I had a few that were younger and a couple that were as old as 65. I was getting repeat customers. Hell, I had regulars. Most of the women I would have slept with for free. There were times that I left one hotel room and went to another. I think a lot of them got a rise out of paying for it and kind of felt like they were objectifying me, and I was there only for their entertainment and enjoyment for the time I was in their room. I can't say there was anything too crazy. Mostly me going to rooms and smashing. Occasionally, I would get a request to wear something weird, or get spanked, and I would oblige. I got pegged a few times. I ended up stopping because the hotel started catching on to me. I was worried I was going to get reported. Now I am married and out of shape, and I never get propositioned. Story 36. I was flat broke, walking through the grocery store, trying to figure out how to feed my wife and myself for another week until payday using the $7 in my pocket. I turned down an aisle to look at the canned beans and saw a $20 bill on the ground. Nobody was around, so I snatched it up and stuck it in my pocket. A flood of relief washed over me, and I stood there for a minute trying to decide how to spend it. Then a father and his son turned down the aisle, looking worried, heads sweeping back and forth as they searched the floor. "I'm sure it's around here somewhere. We'll find it," the father told his kid. As they passed, he asked me, "I'm sorry, you didn't happen to see some money on the ground, did you?" Without even a second's hesitation, I replied, "No, sorry, didn't see anything." They kept moving. I got my groceries and went home. I've done a lot of crafty things in my life, but that one sticks with me. Story 37. I stole. I was younger, barely out of high school. I was suffering the beginning effects of a mental illness I wouldn't be diagnosed with for another year. I was working for an old lady as a live-in companion caretaker. The job was boring. She was annoying. I was young and a very different person than I am now. Her husband had died and left her a very wealthy widow. She only used cash, kept it around the house, used to leave her purse right next to her lazy chair in the living room. I started by going through her wallet, and by the time I got caught, I was going into the top drawer where she kept envelopes full of cash. I got caught because after 6 months of taking maybe $60 at a time, I took a whole envelope of $100 bills. Before that morning, I had taken maybe a couple hundred from her. She never kept hard cash in her purse. She must have had at least $6,000 in that dresser drawer. The envelope I took had $1,000 in it. She had started noticing the missing cash a few months before, but she had slight memory issues, so she thought she was just misplacing it. Her kids set up a hidden nanny cam. I got caught on camera taking $10 out of her wallet. They confronted me, I admitted to it, but only to the $10. I lied and said it was the first time. That I heard her talk about misplacing the money and wanted to see if I could get away with taking some from her. Her kids believed me. They asked me to get my things out of her house while she was at church the next day. I put the envelope back in her dress in full and haven't spoken to her since, except to apologize over the phone and via letter. I've always regretted it and made strides to be a better person, and got help for the mental illness. Story 38. Drank a glass of unknown liquids that friends made in 8th grade. Ended up getting jaundice 2 days later, and full-on liver failure in the hospital for 2 weeks after that. So many things were added that the doctors couldn't identify the root cause, and I just had to wait it out or end up getting a liver transplant. But I earned it 25 cents. Story 39. Not ducked up in a sexual way, but ducked up in I screwed over tons of people. I worked at Compusa during the closing liquidation. Everything was discounted by type and percentage on a daily basis. So, Mondays, computers would receive a % discount. Tuesday, software would receive a discount, etc., etc. Well, this was when thumb drives were still really expensive, and a 1 GB was huge. While getting stock out of the back, I found a full unopened box of 1 GB Compusa brand thumb drives. I decided to hide the box up above the drop ceiling in the stockroom they were in. Then, on the very last day the store was open, I pulled the box out and took them to customer service to purchase. By that time, they had reached something like 90% off. I bought a box of 101 GB thumb drives for what came out to be around $2 a drive, if I remember correctly. I then turned around, and 3 weeks later sold them all on Craigslist for $15 each, which was still about 1/4 of the cost of one at regular price. I see it as kinda ducked up because there were tons of people that were wanting to buy thumb drives for super cheap, and I just kept telling them that we were out of stock, as well as the liquidator. He saw via our inventory system. There was a box of thumb drives that should be there, but wasn't. He ended up writing them off as stolen. When I brought them up and he saw them, he got a really pissed look on his face and asked where I found them. Told him that the box had fallen between a shelf and a wall and had a bunch of store displays piled on top of them. Story 40. I used to write smut on commission, based out of a forum on a fanfic site. I had a scale for pay-by-pages, plus I'd negotiate for certain types of content. Wholesome story about spending time with a dead lover, imagine Sways and Ghost essentially, was a very different rate than a story about ducking Bigfoot. Last story I ever sold like this was about $250 USD for about 20 pages, so extremely expensive, about an incestuous same abuse. I spent 5 years in the Corps, and that story is the thing that most haunts me. Story 41. When I was homeless, I hung around with some other homeless people. It's really interesting, actually. Lots of different cliches, some worse than others. Kinda like school, but all adults, young adults. Anyway, I quickly realized who to avoid. Junkies and alcoholics, and find out where the junkies hide their stash at night, since we all lived out of a homeless shelter. I waited until everyone was in for the night, middle of winter. 10C. I stay out. All night. Nearly freeze to death, but managed to score 10+ hypodermic needles. Not my proudest moment, but it got me 300 and apparently the person who is belonged to cleaned up shortly after, so I don't feel too bad about it. Not sure if I got undercut, but I gave them to a friend better connected than me in the underground side of my city. So if he took a seller's fee, I really can't blame him. Story 42. Sold fake acid to some kid when we were both in high school. Literally sold the dude little squares off my homework for 15 a pop. He came back 5 more times. Genuinely never understood why. Story 43. Met a guy I'd been camming for in person because he was local. So stupid. And ended up giving him a BJ, and then cuddling for like 2 hours. He ended up talking about how he wanted a girlfriend, and I had to awkwardly be like, "Welp, I should go?" Never met anyone from that section of my life in person again. Story 44. I ate 2 ghost peppers for $100. My great uncle was saying that if anyone is able to eat it and not freak out, cry, he would pay them $100, so my mom called me, thinking it would be funny. So I walked over to their house, ate them both, and got paid. Honestly, the hardest I've ever had to hold my crap together. I have a blank face red and little bit of tears streaming down. But I didn't complain once or freak out, took the money, then proceeded to down a bunch of milk. It really doesn't help, but while it's still in your mouth, it stops for a sec. Also had the worst stomach pains after that. Story 45. While on a field trip back in high school, some buddies and I shoplifted the gift shop at the NASA Space Center in Houston. I stole 2 replica Apollo 11 patches. I kept one and sold the other. No idea what for. One and only time I've shoplifted. I had get friends. Story 46. I'm a straight guy, and I knew a gay man who I was acquaintances with. He always joked with me and hit on me. One day I was hard up for cash and I asked to borrow $40. He said he would give me $80 if I let him BJ. I thought real hard and figured duck it. I ain't gay and I am broke. I'll just close my eyes. It was very strange getting a BJ while not being aroused mentally or into it. Story 47. When I was in school and really broke, I had a mutual friend call me asking to use my truck. This guy was really sketchy and offered me $800 to help him with something. Basically, he sold powder for another guy, delivering it through the mail, and he forgot to address 2 packages containing a lot of powder and put them in a mailbox. He wanted me to help him steal the whole mailbox and load it into my truck. It was incredibly stupid, but everything worked out. Although I'm pretty sure just waiting by the mailbox all day for the postal worker would have worked too. Kinda miss those days. Story 48. I have not done anything but hell. I'd be willing to suck a banana for like $30. I'm so desperate for a job and money at it. When I say desperate, I'm not like I severe debt nor barely living. I'm doing fine. But money is needed for pretty much everything these days. Story 49. I've changed a paraplegic man's diaper about 6 times so far tonight. I've spent probably an hour and a half in there total. So with my base rate plus night shift incentive, probably $18.20, pre-tax and deductions. Story 50. Put my head through a window at a party for a half-full box of beers, needless to say. I went to hospital, got 13 stitches in my nose, and never received the beers. Story 51. Whether it was intentional or not, I once drunk stripped for my bar manager for her birthday party at the bar. We worked at that lead to my promotion to assistant manager. Story 52. I dated a gay for pay guy before. He had johns and everything and wouldn't want to sex with me doggy style because it reminded him of work. Summer flings. Story 53. I told my flamboyantly gay coworker I didn't have a gag reflex. He didn't believe me and challenged me to a deep throat competition with a banana. I won $80 and he winked at me. I felt a little uncomfortable, but $80 is $80.